What do you do? Where are you from? Where are you at on your Bitcoin journey?
So I actually grew up in Illinois most of my life, but I've been in Juneau, Alaska for about 10 years. And so currently working at Costco here in Juneau, Alaska, which, fun fact, we're actually the world's smallest Costco, which we take pride in that. And yeah, so I've been there for about 4 years or so. Aside from that, I do photography. That's probably one of my biggest passions. And of course, Bitcoin has been a huge passion to me, thanks to you. And first off, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. You've done so much for the Bitcoin community, especially here in Juneau, Alaska, and you've definitely been a huge influence on my life and changed my life, actually. So I want to thank you for that. And yeah, it's definitely been a big journey for me. I feel like sometimes I feel like an underdog in life where I've had to work really hard for what I do. And Bitcoin, I've always heard about Bitcoin growing up, even when it first came out, but there wasn't a lot of information on it. And you always heard, oh, it's a Ponzi scheme, or it's just, people to get rich, or, and I think you kind of brush that off like, okay, I guess it's really nothing. But over the years, you've seen the price action go up and you're like, okay, wait a second, what's this all about? And unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of education back in the day, and I kind of wish there was, more education on it. Otherwise, I think I would have been a little more in tune to it, but that's the way things go. But yeah, and just over the period of time that you've taught us the Premier Bitcoin, that's been a huge help to gain more knowledge in that. And I think watching different YouTube videos, but also that class, I've gained a lot of knowledge. And I think you have to go back in time. I know a lot of other people have touched base on, the beginning of time as far as humans. I can't even imagine what it would have been like living back then, trying to survive, time and energy, just trying to survive from, wild animals and all that stuff. And I think Bitcoin has been a big part of my life because time and energy has been huge.
For you, working at Costco,
yeah.
How have you been able to take advantage of your situation through your job? Because that's a good story. A lot of people don't have the ability to do what you were able to do. So can you explain how you worked with, who you worked with to be able to allocate your assets how you wanted to allocate them?
Oh yeah. So the issue that I had was when I first got to Costco, I couldn't really allocate any of my assets within my retirement, like for Bitcoin. So if I wanted to do Bitcoin, for instance, I used T. Rowe Price. They didn't offer that. Luckily, I had an individual IRA, so I was able to have that as an option for my retirement account. I got very lucky because when you were teaching me, I had the opportunity to get at a good price. I think the price action went from $16,000 to $30,000, and by that time it's kind of scary because change is very difficult, I think, for people, especially with the current fiat system. We know that the dollar has lost so much of its value, 90% of its value over the years, and for myself, I think of my time and energy and how much work I put into my job. And looking at my past retirement accounts, I haven't really seen the effects that I was hoping for making money. And ever since I was able to transfer my money into my Swan IRA, I've noticed a huge impact, even in such a short amount of time. Granted, it is scary because, Bitcoin is volatile, but the volatility, I think, is a good thing. Because one, people can get in at a good price. And plus, it's kind of boring if it's just sitting there still for the whole time. But I'm grateful for that I was able to do that, and I've learned a lot, and yeah.
It's funny, for me, and I've heard this from other people too, it's not when the price is going up that it bothers me. It's not when the price is going down that bothers me. It's when the price isn't moving that really bothers me. When it just sits there at a price and it just runs sideways for a long time, because it doesn't go up to the all-time high and just sit there. It goes up to the all-time high or new all-time high, and then it comes back down. And then it sits there and it might go down, and it sits there and it goes back up and it sits there. And you can have several months of just riding sideways. And you just don't know what it's going to do next. I guess that unpredictability of running sideways where you don't know which direction it's going to go, that's more bothersome than anything. I remember when we first started teaching people locally about Bitcoin, you weren't there at the very beginning, but your father was. And so when I started working with him and other people, that was at the top of the last run. And the people who stuck with it, which was everybody who attended the class, really stayed with it, and they stacked all the way down. So I think that was really good for you guys, for everybody who was involved here in Juneau, because you started at a high and you learned it while the money that you stacked went down in value. But you learned it to such a degree that you had faith that it was going to go back up because you understood the asset. So I guess for me, that's a big win, to be able to let people, help people understand right from the get-go that this is a 4-year cycle. It's going to go down. You just want to buy it all the way down, buy it all the way back up. And everybody seemed to follow suit. Not to name names, hopefully we'll have some other people talking. And I'll be speaking with some other people here pretty soon who have ridden this wave. So in your perspective, there's people who have different views of Bitcoin and things that it's going to do for different people. What are you more passionate about for the asset? What would you like to see it do for the world overall?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I want to see people happy. I know there's a lot of struggling, a lot of people struggling, and I guess I can bring this up even as a millennial. I've seen so many people in debt, student debt, people trying to, afford a house. I was talking to a good buddy of mine, and we were saying how our grandparents or great grandparents, how housing was maybe $50,000 for just a house back then. Now it's $500,000 just to have a house. And for me, I don't view Bitcoin as I want to get rich and I don't want to do anything else in life, because I think idle time is not good. I think we all do need to contribute to the world. But I think just being able to know that you're secure. And for me, the one thing that, that I take to heart with Bitcoin is time. I value my time. I also value my family. And I believe that, Bitcoin can, bring that back. And I think that's important.
Has it affected your time preference? Are you, for me, before I went down the rabbit hole, I found that I was always stressed. It was always such a grind to have good credit, or, make sure all my bills are paid and make sure that, finances overall are just squared up. And since I've found out about Bitcoin and I've been in this for a little while, my time preference has completely gone down. My stress level's gone down. Have you felt your anxiety go down, knowing where you're at?
Oh my gosh, you have no idea. No, yeah, it's huge, man. If you can ask anyone, before I got into Bitcoin, because I think too, as millennials, we have the fiat mindset. And I've talked to people even at work, and I'll be like, so when do you want to retire? What's your retirement goal? Well, I'm going to work till I'm 65, maybe 70, and hopefully my retirement will be good. And I'm just like, oh man, that's so depressing. And of course, I look back and I tell them, well, my goal, I'm hoping maybe 5-10 years. And they kind of give me a look like, 5-10 years, how is that even possible? But you have to shift your mindset from fiat to the Bitcoin standard. And you see what Bitcoin does, what it can do in the future. And I think that's given me hope too. Honestly, Wade, this Bitcoin is probably, I've never had my money work hard for me as Bitcoin has, and I think that's been huge.
It's funny because you say work hard, and I guess the thought comes to mind that the dollar is working for you is the viewpoint that people have. Put your money to work for you by putting it in an appreciating asset. But there are no appreciating assets, really. They just all ride the curve, the inflation curve. So Bitcoin only works for you just by defending itself from being debased. So it's not really working, it's just a fortress. Whereas everything else fights really hard it's like on the other side of the fortress wall, fighting to redeem or to hold on to any little bit of life it has with an invading force coming in and sacking the village. So, yeah, Bitcoin doesn't have to work hard; it just has to keep the walls strong.
Yep, absolutely. And I think too, another thing with millennials too is money has been an issue, I think, for people, and it's sad because life shouldn't be about money. I've seen a lot of people get divorced because of marriages ruined because people don't feel like they can have enough, and even having kids, it's expensive, and I feel like in the society it shouldn't be that way. Things should be a lot easier. People should be happier. You work hard for your money, and I think of over the years that any jobs that I've had, I've worked for Allen Marine and a few other nonprofits, and of course Costco, and even when I put my money into my retirement account, and of course, change is difficult, because you've been on a fiat system or standard for a long time, and then hearing about Bitcoin, part of me when I as soon as I clicked, my transfer to my IRA, I was like, oh man, it's scary. Change is scary, but you also have to have faith that you know what Bitcoin is. It's decentralized. No one can control it. No government can control it. There's only 21 million Bitcoin, and to me, just the scarce, knowing that it's scarce, that my money is actually growing, and that's the one thing I don't like about stocks is I remember you were telling me like, yeah, you should probably get out of stocks, and the funny thing is the stocks that I had before I got into Bitcoin, they actually went down in value. And of course, I sold at a loss, bought Bitcoin, and now I'm like in the green. And and that's the cool thing with Bitcoin is, no matter when you get into Bitcoin, yeah, you're gonna, might be in the red for a short time, and you do feel a little pain, but eventually you're gonna get to a point where you're always gonna be in the green. And I think that's pretty cool.
On your journey, like we all have different people that we follow, podcasts and whatnot. Who is it that you soaked up the most content of? Who is the person who you feel like communicates to you the best?
Gosh, there's a lot of them. I can't really say one specific. I know Simply Bitcoin. I watch them. I like Dante. He's pretty cool. I guess I can relate to him because of sports. But pretty much any of them, I've learned. And I think Rustin was one of them. He was a really cool guy. But it just seems like...
But take it back to the beginning, when you first got into it. Who was it that you were...
Oh, I would say the first video that I've ever seen was probably with, I think, Robert Breedlove and then Sailor. I think, was it the Sailor Stories?
The Sailor series?
Yeah, or series, yeah. And that was what kind of got me, and it just kind of, it made you think about life in general and, how far we've come as a society.
It's funny, I've watched countless hours of Sailor, like everything he's done pretty much for the past several years. And Breedlove, same thing, like so much of his content, and I never got through the Sailor series. Like of all the things, like that was the one thing that I never got myself to sit all the way through. I started with my Bitcoin journey pre-Bitcoin, before I knew anything about Bitcoin, with Mike Maloney and the Hidden Secrets of Money, and that's where I took on my understanding of what money was, and that opened the door, really wide for Bitcoin to fill that gap of, this is going to replace the whole system. So, surprising I missed that series like that. I should go back and actually watch that, because it seems like everybody I've talked to has gone down the Sailor series rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched that, and it's you have to watch it over and over, and I feel like you always get something. Anytime you watch the videos, you always get something different, or you get something out of it and stuff. And it definitely teaches you about life and where the beginning and then where you're at now and how far we've come along. And I feel like each time period they've had their own challenges. And before, yeah, you're in survival mode. Also, learning how to make food. Nowadays, it's easy. Like when you're born, you have a house, you're safe. You don't have to worry about really bad things happen to you in life, except for, I feel like financial now, it seems like that's kind of the tough thing for people, financial security.
Do you have any concerns for Bitcoin and what it's doing right now, being adopted in the political world, or?
That's the only thing I'm wondering. I was going to get your opinion. I know they always say, should we keep government out? Should we keep, all the big players out? And that's my only concern well, is there manipulation? If you have the government buying a bunch of Bitcoin, or even with Michael Saylor, as much as I like Michael Saylor, I mean, I think he owns what, 400,000 Bitcoins? 500,000 now, wow. And I don't know, in your opinion, do you think that's still a good thing for government and for single players to have that much Bitcoin, or should it be more just for the people?
It was inevitable, but I don't think my understanding of it at the time when I saw government going in was where it's at now. My concern now is, like, I've always sided more with I've always been a fan of Alex Gladstein and his mission and what it does for the rest of the world. And I am very anti-war, very anti-IMF, World Bank. You look at how very anti-French apartheid, very anti any nation that takes advantage of another nation and uses a monetary system that they control to extract the resources of people and keep them without electricity or without running water or without heat, without like the basics of survival, without having a basic, air conditioning unit in a hospital, much less anything that the hospital needs. Like that, to me, that's atrocious. So with the U.S. government buying Bitcoin, that's great. That strengthens the U.S. And I always saw it as, well, if we're going to buy Bitcoin, other nations are going to buy Bitcoin. Everybody's going to strengthen themselves. They're all going to want to mine Bitcoin. And it's going to be a completely decentralized system globally, and it's going to be great. But my fear now is the talk of using a stable coin. Because if the U.S. government uses a stable coin, then they have the ability to project their influence through inclusivity, which is, I like inclusivity to the rest of the world. But maybe they'll be able to use that backed by Bitcoin and use the Bitcoin to enhance their power over the rest of the world, which, yes, Bitcoin value goes up. So either way, it's a winning case for people who have held Bitcoin. But for the human rights aspect, and in the financial inclusivity in the short term, that's great for people who are, in impoverished nations. But what if we continue to have dollar dominance and a strong dollar, then we also continue to have the power, whether it be through the money printer or through power projection through Bitcoin and USDC, whatever, whether it be USDC or Tether or whatever they go with for a stable coin. Like that, that concerns me. It's not the mining aspect, it's not the manipulation, it's not the forking. For me, it's how is the federal government going to keep the power within the US federal government and use that power and that force to extract resources from people in developing nations. Like we call them developing nations. I hate that term because they're not developing, they're repressed because we're manipulating them. We charge high interest rates on bad loans that have, massive requirements put on them. So I don't like the term developing nation. That's like saying the Federal Reserve is a federal institution on Federal Way. It's not a federal institution. It is on Federal Way. It's not true. They're not developing. We keep them from developing. So my fear of what Bitcoin's going through right now is just that, like, this transition that scares me a little bit.
Yeah.
I like the idea of dollar dominance, but we also have to keep in mind that Hitler was dominant. We don't want somebody to dominate. We want, decentralization. We want individual communities coming up with their own ways of living. So we want the people to be able to create their own world. So I am concerned.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that a lot of these smaller countries can get in soon, especially, and my wonder too is, obviously they have the strategic Bitcoin reserve, everything seems like it's approved. Do you think the US will start buying Bitcoin this year? And do you think if that's the case, do you think other smaller nations are actually going to start buying soon? Because that's my fear is, like, especially very impoverished areas aren't able to buy Bitcoin at a good price, and hopefully they can get ahead of the game. That's my worry as well.
Yeah, some yes, like we all know El Salvador, but what about Guatemala or Nicaragua or Costa Rica? Or let's get out of that region. What about any of the Eastern European countries? Some have, some haven't. What about Asia? There's so many countries in the world. Some 100 and some odd countries or 200 and some odd countries. I don't even know, 130 different nations. I'm throwing out a number here, what sounds right. But with that many nations, how many have actually got Bitcoin? I'm pretty sure like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Russia, China, I bet they have a decent amount of Bitcoin. There's a couple other nations in Southeast Asia. I bet South Korea has Bitcoin, North Korea. But there's so many, like, we can count North Korea out as being a humane country to have Bitcoin, so I don't care if they have it or not. I prefer that something happens and the people are living a more free life. But other nations, like, there's so many out there that, where's Peru at? Isabella did a great
I saw
documentary.
That video. Yeah.
God, she's amazing.
I was shocked. I've been to Peru before, and I think it was a small village, right, where they're accepting Bitcoin. I was like, holy cow! I have a few people that I know that are in Peru, and I was sending them messages like, yeah, I didn't realize that your country, this one area actually accepts Bitcoin transactions, and how smart is that? I mean,
I actually took that video and had Tristan and Senna, my little ones, watch it. Because I wanted them to see what children go through. Like, our kids don't realize how bad we have it, or how good we have it, until they see what life is like for children in other parts of the world. And I think that's important that kids see that. I think maybe that is something that is missing in the schools today. One of many things for financial education and what an impoverished nation actually looks like, and what it's like to live in a country like that day to day. Isabella's documentary was just, it was, and it wasn't just her. She was down there with Get Based and like another group that I follow. Great content. So what's your favorite thing going on this year?
Oh gosh, this year I'd say definitely Bitcoin Alaska. Of course, I guess I can't say this year, but last year when we went to Nashville, that was a good time. That was my first, aside from having our little conference here, that was the first time I'd ever been to anything like that, especially seeing, and that's the one thing I think is going to be awesome about Bitcoin Alaska is you're not going to really see it through a screen. You're going to actually see people live. And I think that's going to be huge for people that are not only in Bitcoin, that are also learning Bitcoin. They can kind of get that personal experience with everyone.
So of the conference that we've got going on this year, if there was one person that we could get to the conference that would just like completely take it to the next level, who we've got so far, we've talked about that, who would you want to see there that's not going?
That I don't know for sure yet. I would love, as far as locally, I would love to get Begich and then Dunleavy. I think that would be awesome. That's my hope, but who knows? And I think Alaska can benefit a lot from Bitcoin. And I think about even the permanent fund dividend this year, and even aside from that, like how if people can incorporate Bitcoin, even in the nice thing about living here, especially if you have kids, I mean, how lucky is that to have a permanent fund go to your bank account? And imagine if you could actually put that into Bitcoin and how that could grow over the years. And I wish people would understand that. But I think by having the governor and Begich there, I think that would be huge. People would see that, and then of course it would draw a lot of people in, and I hope that happens.
Yeah, if the governor showed up, my hope was that the commissioners would show up, and the director of Permanent Fund Corporation, and the Alaska Retirement Board, and the all the different various unions and the native corporations, Tlingit and Haida, Huna Totem, Sea Alaska, Gold Belt. If everybody just came in and they took the time to have an open mind at the conference, and they didn't follow the mainstream narrative that surrounded Bitcoin for so long, and with an open mind and an open heart, and they just took the time to talk to the experts that are coming here, then Juneau would change so fast. But it's just getting those people to open their minds and come in with just completely open and ask the questions that they need to have answered. I think we're going to have the best people on the planet to answer those questions. So I'm really excited about it. What's the event? What's your favorite event that you're looking forward to?
Oh, wow. The conference in general, but as far as if you're talking about just like outside of the conference, I'm really looking forward to the Tracy Arm trip. Working for Alan Marine for over the years, I've been to Tracy Arm a lot, and what a better way of hanging out with Bitcoiners and going to Tracy Arm. There's beautiful glacier. Sometimes you see wildlife, bears, humpback whales, sometimes orcas. It's always a hit and miss, but one of the cool parts about Tracy Arm that I enjoy is you go up to Icy Falls. There's this waterfall that sometimes the boat goes up to. But a lot of people don't know is it's fed from an actual lake. It's called Icy Lake. It's the only true waterfall that we're aware of that's in Alaska. So I think just seeing the beauty of Alaska and hanging out with Bitcoiners, I think that'd be a lot of fun. And I know for you, the veteran part, I think you guys are going to have a lot. I think you guys are doing the gun range and all that stuff.
Well, the veteran side of it is open to everybody. It's not exclusive to veterans at this point. Yeah. So there's doing the forge. I'm really, really looking forward to that. Talk to Scott Wiley, who puts that on. He does some incredible firearms training, but this is a no firearms course. You don't have to have a firearm. It's an 8-hour scenario-based class. You're put through different scenarios, and you have to figure out how you'd react, what you do. When it's the proper time to defend yourself, how to defend yourself, as well as what to expect after you defend yourself, mentally, physically, legally. So he's an incredible human being, and to have him putting on this course here is just going to be awesome. So that's open to everybody, but it's a $100 class for what you get out of it, 8 hours of good, solid training. And it's the things that they don't teach, like everybody can go to a gun range and pick up a firearm and start dropping rounds. And it's good to get training on how to do that, but at the same time, I guess putting people through scenarios, maybe it brings the real side of, a lot of people look down on people who defend themselves currently. And by taking people through a scenario and putting them through that stress, I'm hopeful that it helps people grow on the topic of firearms and self-defense. We've also got the run, but then we've got, let's just watch the video. You want to watch the video?
Let's do it.
So this is just a short that was put together by Mel, who's helping do our planning meeting. That's the promo video for the conference. Now, as Still a work in progress. We've still got more speakers signing on, more people who are coming up here. But so far, it's looking pretty promising. Now, rolling back onto our other topic, if you were to give a message to millennials, what would it be? Like if you could get them to actually listen to what you were saying, because sometimes we find that it's really hard to get people to listen. And the most success we have is one-on-one with people. What would you want to tell them?
I would say be open-minded. Like when I first got into Bitcoin, it was, I think a lot of times people think they're too late. And that was my mistake was like, I'm like, I can't afford to pay $60,000 for a coin. And of course, that's when I learned that you can buy fractions of Bitcoin instead of just buying a whole coin. And I think if they can get their mind off the fiat standard and versus the Bitcoin standard, and once they learn that, and once you really get down the rabbit hole and you learn that, it'll click. And that's when it clicked to me. That's when I got to, started doing my retirement stuff. I'm like, okay, I got to get in now because I truly believe this. Like we need to change. And I do believe that it will change their lives. Their lives will be a lot easier being on a Bitcoin standard. And yeah, things will be great. So,
can you think of anything else you'd like to cover, talk about?
Well, just as far as the conference goes, I think people, you don't have to be from Alaska just to come to this conference. There's so many people that have dreamed their whole lives coming to Alaska, and we're probably one of the prettiest places in the world, in my opinion. So I would say definitely, making an effort to make it up here, and because there's so many activities just like we saw in the video that they'll be able to experience and to get to know. So
yeah, I struggled with the idea of holding a conference here, and people would tell me that this is a perfect place for it, and I always threw back at them, we don't have the population base to support this kind of a conference, and I've got resistance from people who have agreed with that, like, yeah, Juneau couldn't hold a conference like this. This is an Anchorage type conference you'd want to have in a big city with a larger facility and more infrastructure. But we have 32,000 people. So many of them work in government. So many of them are policymakers. This is where the governor's mansion is. This is where the Capitol is. This is where the Alaska State Legislature meets. This is where the Alaska Retirement Board is. This is where the Permanent Fund Corp is. This is where the headquarters for a lot of the, like Plinkett and Haida that heads up the Southeast group of Native corporations, as well as the smaller ones, entities, I believe it's structured is there underneath the Sea Alaska Gold Belt, Hunatotum, as well as many others that I don't even know. So, and then all the labor unions, the public employee unions. So there's I just imagine 32,000 people working for those, the Department of Revenue, Department of Administration, commissioners, like all of those people working out of Juneau. Like all of that policy being framed with 32,000 people. So when you orange pill that person who works at I don't want to belittle people because everybody who works is if they're happy, they're successful, right? But people who work in jobs that some people might see as like a lower class job, those people have family members who are policymakers. Like so many people who you might run into in a pub that, they just do some random job in tourism or whatever, might have an uncle who happens to be like head of a multi-$100 million corporation. So you're so close to the policy here in Juneau. And to change that policy, to change that Alaska Permanent Fund Corporation so that you can allocate, you can get them to allocate to Bitcoin or the Alaska Retirement Management Board. So I think Juneau is actually probably the absolute best place on the planet because per capita, we have more policy and there's no roads out. They can't escape. Once they're here, and they can go to the conference or they can stay home, but there's not a lot they can do to avoid the Bitcoiners that come into town. And they'll have those conversations one-on-one with people who really know what Bitcoin is. So I'm really anxious to see that.
Yeah, I was surprised with how many states, I was looking on some of the charts that are, going through the process of adopting Bitcoin. Do you think Alaska is close, or do you think they've got a long way? My only worry is, things are moving fast, and I'm hoping Alaska can move fast enough before assuming the U.S. does start buying Bitcoin, I hope we can get in at a good time. And
I think policy-wise, like Rep. Bagich, of course, he's got the accompanying bill for Senator Lummis's bill, so that's promising. I know Governor Dunleavy has an understanding of Bitcoin. I'm not sure to what level. I know he's got friends who are in the world of Bitcoin, and I know he's been exposed to some people that I know who are Bitcoiners, heavy Bitcoiners, so I'm hopeful. As far as state policy at the legislative level, I don't know, maybe. I think legislators, they're elected on the policies that they put forward to the people. So the people elect the policymakers to follow the policy that their constituents want. So we think of legislators as leaders and innovators. I think the paradigm, or the negative side of this is we don't elect leaders and innovators, we elect followers. And we expect them to do what we want them to do. We elect them based on a policy. So if you want somebody to has a stance on something, if you want a policy that says people can't skip across the street, well, you're going to elect the person who grandstands, nobody gets to skip across the street. And nothing else matters to you, like that means this person's policy is always going to be that no matter what, because that's where they got generated their votes. So do they have the room or the time to innovate and to understand something that is as important as Bitcoin is? So they get locked in the fiat world, and they're trapped in a world of they have to follow their constituents in order to maintain their position. So really, elected officials aren't leaders. They're followers. They have to follow the masses. So I struggle with that. Sometimes, elected officials can break free of that paradigm, but that requires the constituents to have a deep understanding of it. And sometimes legislators, it's not that they don't understand, it's that they don't publicly want to speak about it because there's a negative stigma that follows it. And Bitcoin has a negative stigma in some circles. So if they speak out positive for it, how's that going to affect their voter base? So the goal is, it's up to us, the people, to educate the people, which gives the legislators the ability to grow and understand. And it gives them the ability to not be fearful of the negative stigma that follows it, because we have to create that positivity around the asset. So you take a town of 30,000 people and you bring in 1,000 people from out of state who are Bitcoiners to see what Juneau has to offer. Get businesses to onboard onto a Bitcoin standard, get policymakers, help them understand, present to them why they should be doing this for their constituents, and why it makes sense for both them and their people and their voter base. That's really important. So how far is our legislature from this? I don't put that on the legislators. Like, that's not how our government's designed. I put that on us to make sure that the people understand. When the people understand and when the people tell the legislator, this is important to us, the legislators will listen. But if the people aren't speaking to the legislators and saying this is important to us, we're gonna, we can't just sit back and think that a legislator is gonna take a risk when we're not willing to take the risk by reaching out or by building or by planning conferences or by putting your neck out there. We can't expect them to help make change if we don't make change. So every time I hear about you onboarding somebody new or finding out that somebody new is a Bitcoiner, that's always a smile on my face, because we just have to keep growing and keep, educating. And eventually, the circles get so big, and then they just, it's the adoption curve. If I'm constantly orange pilling people, great. But if I orange pill a bunch of people, and then each of those people teaches Bitcoin to 4 or 5 people a year, and then each of those people teach Bitcoin to 4 or 5 people a year, eventually that just grows exponentially.
Yeah. Even at work, I have a few friends that were like, yeah, look at the price of Bitcoin. It's always fun just to, get excited about that. And And like I said, I really hope that people will start paying attention, and I hope they can come to the conference and they can gain a ton of knowledge. And I know I've gained a lot of knowledge over the last few years, and like I said, you've done a lot for us, and I want to thank you for that.